All right, hey guys. So today we're going to be talking about Substance Painter. Um, so your project for this, basically going forward, will be using Substance Painter and introducing you to this tool set. So, excuse me one second. Really? So anyway, so Substance Painter is a industry used texturing program that allows you to paint directly on the models on your 3D model. Whereas with Photoshop, we were painting on the UV map. Substance Painter allows you to paint directly on the model, which is superior in some ways because it allows us to have a bit more of an artistic approach. So I personally like it. This program is used more in video game assets because they tend to have lower resolution needs for the actual texture maps, where Substance Painter doesn't export textures as high as we would like um, for cinema and film, film and TV, but it's still really excellent program to use. Now, some other programs that you can use to achieve texture painting would be Zbrush. Zbrush has a texture painting program that is texture painting X. Part of it that it works really well. It's referred to as poly painting, um, and I've used it for years. It works phenomenally well. It does not have a lot of the extra stuff that this program has. Um, Substance Tinted does a lot of procedural texturing and a lot of extra stuff that like ZBrush just can't do. Another program is called 3D Coat. That is another 3D modeling program, but it also has, I would say, probably superior texturing uh, assets in it than ZBrush does. We actually do have 3D code. I got some licensing agreements back in early 2020, and we actually have it in the lab in 325. I'm still dipping my toes in it, so I'm not prepared to teach that yet. But if you want to use 3D code, you guys can use that in 325. And I do believe you can either get a heavily discounted or free copy of 3D code as well for being students. So, Substance Painter, since we're going to be using this, this piece of software can be gotten at substance3d.com. You can actually get a free um, license of this, as since you're a student, you will need to upload some evidence of being a academic student. Um, so just be prepared to do that. Generally, what I've seen is it's literally just uh, you needing to upload a copy of your student ID. I don't really usually see anything other than that. So you guys do have to use this for the program or for the course. So make sure you get a copy of it and use it. Um, so yeah. Uh, Full disclaimer: we do not have this on the lab machines, so you will need to use this on your laptops or on your desktop at home. Okay, but again, like I said, it is free, and you can, I believe, the license is for like a full year, so you can use it and learn on it however you want. Okay. All right. Um, so let's talk about it. So Substance Painter has an interface. They have a lot of procedural stuff that is they have a lot of stuff that is, like I said, procedural, where we can drop materials onto it. The interface is very similar to Photoshop in some ways. The interface basically has, you can either view in a 2D view where you're looking at the UV layout like in Photoshop, or you're looking at your object in 3D view, kind of like in Zbrush or Maya. Um, just kind of to get you kind of prepped on this, objects, any object that you're going to work on in Substance has to be UV'd before you bring it into um, into Substance Painter. If you try to bring in an object that has not been UV'd, it will basically spit that object back out and say, I can't do this. And you have to basically, you'll get an error message of some sort. But you have to make sure that it is UV'd, okay? That's the number one issue I see with students getting into this. They forget to UV their stuff. It's basically, it doesn't know how to deal with an object that isn't UV. So you got to make sure it's UV first, okay? When you want to bring an object in, we can go to new, and we're going to ask, it's going to ask us to select a file. So it's going to basically allow us to bring in generally OBJ files are what I kind of focus on. So usually I'll bring that in and work off of those. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the Blazer rifle, which I hope is already downloaded. Yeah, maybe, or the grenade. I have a couple objects here. We'll do the grenade. Actually, no, yeah, grenade will be fine. All right, so I'm gonna bring that in. It has some other options in here where it's gonna ask you like, what do you want the document resolution to be? You can set it from anywhere from 128 to 4096, which would be 4K. FYI, when I refer to 1K, 2K, or 4K, it's basically these values. 10, where a map size is going to be 1,000 by 1,000 pixels, or 2,000 by 2,000, or 4,000 by 4,000 pixels. So these are 1K, 2K, 4K. Setting your document resolution in here is going to have a direct correlation to the performance of your computer. Okay, if you have a very powerful computer with a really nice graphics card, you're going to be able to handle 4K document resolution all day long, no problem. If you're working with something that might be a little iffy, like my graphics card is probably about 5 years old, you know, 2K, 1K might be where you want to hang out, but this is all changeable. If I want to check and see what the higher resolution texture looks like, I can jump up to 4K and then jump down to 1K and keep working as I need to. So it's all relative. None of this really means anything. You can change it. If you have maps from, let's say if you have a ZBrush sculpt that you wanted to texture in this program, you may have a normal map, or you have some texture maps you may have created in ZBrush. You can add those in here and it will automatically bring them into Substance for you. I don't have any of that. I just have my model. Okay. So I'm just going to click OK and bring it in. All right. So here is the object. So this is actually a multiple part object. By the way, navigation in the 3D world, same exact thing as Maya. Alt, left click, right click, and middle mouse click. Okay. So here we can see it in the 3D area, and then we have our UV map sitting right here. So just going up above here, we have brush settings, you know, brush size, flow, stroke, spacing, et cetera, et cetera. We can turn on symmetry if we want to turn on symmetry here. Just click that, turn on and off. We can go over to here, and if you want to change your viewport from 3D only, 2D only, or 3D 2D, generally I go with 3D. I just find it a lot easier for me to use. And then also, you'll see where it says texture set list right here. This is basically all the objects in your scene. So this, you'll see it says we're Lambert 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is when you're exporting out your objects, Substance likes it for you to export all of your objects out as like one OBJ. So you'll select multiple objects and export them all out. It doesn't seem to like it when you try to import multiple objects. It doesn't seem to accept that. They may have changed that in a newer version, at least the past few years, and I've been playing around with it. It does not seem to want that. So the way that you kind of work around that is when you are basically or UVing all of your objects, you'll say click on the button, which is one of these meshes, and I might assign a Lambert to it. Just right click, add new material, Lambert. I'll do the same thing for basically every other piece that I am creating. Okay, so if you look in the hypershade, you may have like 30 different Lamberts for some reason. The reason why I'm doing that is what I'm doing what's basically referred to as I'm doing a material ID for each one of these objects because that's what Substance Painter needs in order to see these as separate objects. If I didn't do this, you would only see one Lambert in here, and basically everything would be attached to that Lambert, and it would be a pain in the butt to actually texture it. So, so what I did is by assigning different Lamberts, I can then turn on and off different parts of my scene. So this kind of works as like a display layer inside of Maya. It makes it easier for me to work with each piece. Now, you can obviously bring in each individual piece as you want. And that doesn't work sometimes. You want to move a little bit faster. You want to paint stuff a little bit quicker. And sometimes, you know, you're going to have weathering or something that's going to go from one object to the next. So I find it best to go ahead, assign a material, so you get that material ID attached to the object. And by doing a different material to each one, it breaks out the material ID for all the meshes. So you have a different one for each one. Now, just to make it nice and easy to understand what I'm looking at, I can double click and basically change the material ID name. Just double clicking. And then rename it. Okay, so it makes it a lot easier. Something else that I'll do is I will go ahead and set up my world maps. What that's referring to, if you go under texture set settings, bake mesh maps, I'm sorry. What this is your environmental maps. So your normal, your world space, your ID, ambient occlusion. It's going to make a whole bunch of different maps that will inform how Substance Painter's materials will interact with the object. This is pretty important. You want to make sure you do this. It's at scale for a lot of things. It's going to tell basically like how some of the procedural like dust and rain and some of the environmental stuff we can do in Substance should interact with these objects. Okay, so I'm going to go over to Bake Mesh Maps. I'm going to make sure all these are checked. It's going to ask for an output size. I'm just going to say give me a nice higher resolution. And we're going to do bake selected textures. So I'll have these ones selected, so we're good there. And it's going to go through and basically check every single one of these objects. And it's going to create a new map. It may take a second. Ambient occlusion is usually one that takes a little bit longer because it's looking at how every single piece of geometry interacts with their sibling pieces. All right, so um, so anyway, so since we got the texture mesh maps already created, if we scroll up here, we can take a look and you can see then under general properties, we have size. Okay, so this is where we can change our document size as we need to. So if you're really having if the computer's running real slow or it's kind of crashing a lot, you can drop it back down to like really, really low, like 128, or you can go up to 4096 as you need to. Okay. Moving over to layers, this will work just like Photoshop where we can add in new layers. Now keep in mind that the layer that you create is only going to be applied to the texture set that you have selected. So button, top half, bottom half, and core are all going to have different layer stacks that, that you can work with. Okay. So if I go in, let's say if I want to create a new layer, let's do a paint layer on the button. So that added a layer 2 right here. And if we go down to properties for paint, this will actually show us kind of what all we can do with this paint layer. Okay. So we have a brush size that we can change as we need to. We have minimum size, we have flow, stroke opacity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that kind of just scrolls down to if you want to do a alpha, we can add alphas on here. So if we want to stamp something in, you can do that. You can also create your own alphas in Photoshop and import those in here as well if you need to. Stencil, same type of idea. If you have an image or something you wanted to stencil, this is where you could like select it and put it in here. Now we're getting into material. So you'll see it has 5 different little buttons: color, metal, rough, normal, and height. If you turn these off, you'll see that basically these materials will either pop in or pop out with their properties. So color is going to be the diffuse color. It can be literally any color you want. So let's do like a bright orange. And there we go. So maybe something like that. So now that is, that's going to be orange. You also can, change maybe like a breakup or something to it if you wanted to do that. But anyway, orange is orange. I can go in and paint all I want to in here. Make my brush size a little bigger. And then since I am working only on the buttons texture set, I don't accidentally paint. I don't actually accidentally paint on the other objects, which is nice. Additionally, we could create a fill layer if we wanted to that was just going to be a single color. We have that option here. So if I wanted to do a red fill layer, I can do that. And you'll notice that we have blend modes that we can change as we want. And then we also have opacity. So for whatever reason, I wanted to blend the red with the orange, I can do that right there. Okay. I'm sure you're also kind of eyeballing all these materials down here. So these are all procedurally created materials. You can do a search You can go on websites and actually download materials, or substance smart materials, as they're sometimes referred to, or just regular materials. There's a difference between materials and smart materials. Um, Materials, it's kind of limited in what they can kind of cover, but they got a really interesting array of stuff. Um, you got some like skin and metal and fabrics and things like that. Smart materials are kind of cool though, because they actually have um, that they're kind of a gathering of different layers and masks and stuff like that that create really unique designs and stuff. So we can also just do a search if you wanted to do that, and just type in metal. And so, like, say this is a fun one. I like this one. There's this aluminum insulator right here that you can drag and drop onto an object. All right, which is kind of cool. So you'll see that it's actually following the UV map that I created for this. If you take a look, you'll see it's actually sitting on there, which is kind of nice. So this aluminum insulator, this material actually has some properties to it that is just not just a flat material. It actually has some normal map and specular mapping going on here, has a little bit of height as well. So like as you see the light kind of hits it, it breaks up, as you might expect an object like this to do so. Now, depending on how the normal map is, or I'm sorry, not the normal map, the UV map is laid out, um, there might be some breakup and seam issues around here. So we can kind of try to get around that by using UV projection and changing that to something called triplanar. So you'll see what happens there is it actually tries to essentially paint it seamlessly across the surface, which in general, it does an okay job. You can change it to a planar projection where it's looking at just one direction, which may or may not be a good idea. You can do a fill, or basically just tries to fill the UV tile. You can do a spherical, which kind of works, kind of not works. But I find usually UV or triplanar works really well. Filtering, you can change it to sharp or high quality. I usually just leave it on high quality. You have a scale right here. So if you wanted to repeat or make the pattern go smaller, you can change it to something like 20. See, it gets kind of crazy. Maybe 10. Now you'll notice that the quality of the map went down. It looks kind of crappy right here. So this is part of this being a 512 map. If we jump this up to say 2048, you'll see it's going to get distinctly nicer. See that? But it's going to be a little bit more of a burden on the system. Okay. Now if we go up to like 4096, it's going to look a lot nicer, but it's also going to take a little more time to render. There we go. So everything's a little bit sharper, a little bit crisper. Yeah, looks good. So I don't need to really have this sitting at 4096 all the time. I'm gonna drop back down to 1024 because I can work with it here. But if you ever want to look at it, where it's a little bit higher quality, you can do it, no problem. Now, let's say I wanted the aluminum insulator to be a different color. Maybe let's make it blue. Maybe make it green, somewhere between blue and green. Okay. Maybe I also wanted to pull that down underneath the other two layers. And maybe I want this guy to the orange to kind of multiply. No, I don't want to multiply. Let's do maybe like a linear dodge. And then the fill layer, we could do that as a pass-through. Not pass-through. Let's do screen. So it kind of changes up the coloring a little bit. And then since we have our mesh maps created, we can actually do some particle work. And so this is going to be basically how we might do weathering or weathering or staining or do like black washes, whatever. We can use special masking and these particle brushes to kind of create really unique patterns. So we'll say, for example, I'm going to do an add layer right here, and I want this to be like a dark gray. So my brush is going to be dark gray. Okay. And then I can go into, let's say, rain, and that's going to be my brush. And so when I go in, we'll see what happens is all these particles kind of start sliding around on the surface. So the mesh maps can tell where gravity needs to be falling for the rain. And it kind of lets it, keep track of everything, which is kind of cool. So you'll see it hits the side, it slides down much more quickly. It hits the top and it kind of just sits there and pulls around a little bit. Maybe pull that down a little bit. I just add some weathering look to it. We also have maybe fracture. Maybe there's like a break or something. Maybe there's like a hit on the plastic. And this might be kind of interesting too. So I'm going to do another layer, but this time I'm going to do a height and a normal. Actually, I'm not going to do normal. I'm going to do height. Now, height, this is going to be like a bump map. Okay. So I'm going to actually do a negative value. And what's going to happen is I'm going to basically drag it across the screen just a little bit. Okay. And so what's happening is little fracture lines are going across the surface, again, interacting with the surface. And it's not only interacting with the surface, it's interacting with the normal map that's being created from the aluminum insulator. So it's not just the geometry, but it's also the materials this layer is sitting on top of that it's interacting with, and trying to process how that procedural particle would actually work, which is pretty cool. So that's neat. Bring down that a little bit. Organic is kind of cool. It's kind of a neat looking one. So we can just do another. This one kind of crawls across the surface in a really neat way. And then maybe if we wanted to have it actually kind of grow across the surface, see how it kind of lifts up a little bit. So I just changed the value on that normal, and you see it just kind of got a little bit shinier. I'm doing metal. So wherever I do the metal, it's going to get shinier on here. Actually, I'm going to turn off color so you can see it maybe a little bit better. See that? It's almost like it got washed. Just kind of cool. And that's only basically going to be hitting the metal area, which is neat. And I'm going to go and turn up height. And what you'll see is it kind of lifts the surface just a little bit. I think it gets a little bit too weird with it, but a little bit too much. but you can see it kind of allows you to add some detail and stuff, which is neat. Now you don't need to do procedural for it to add height. You can just create a new map and then go or create a new texture. Go under brushes, create any brush you want. And create height. So if you want to do scratches or dents or dings, you absolutely can do that. It's kind of cool. All right. What else? I'm gonna look for material, plastic. Let's do maybe like a dusty plastic. I'm gonna drop over to top half. Why can't I do a new material? I'm gonna do, let's do a fill layer. I should be able to add this on. Why am I not doing that? It's not the right type of material, that's why. Do maybe a rubber tire. There we go, rubber tire. It's kind of interesting. You could even do, I really like the machinery ones because they kind of take a lot of the geometry into account when they're creating the maps. Now, also keep in mind that texture settings on these are set to 512, so if I jump it up to 4096, it's going to look a little bit different. So it's just going to process this a little bit. See? That looks actually really cool. I like that a lot. That looks real good. All right, cool. Now, let's say you wanted to like print something or stamp something on here. Back down the bottom half. I'm gonna drop this back down to like 1K. Now I'll take a second to think. Okay. All right, so let's do some stamping. So let's do top half. Let's go to a new layer. I'm gonna do a paint layer. I'm gonna do color. I don't need height. Let's do bright red. And I do want to do, let's do a stencil. And I want to do some sort of logo or something on here. There's tons of these. I mean, you can also, again, you can add in your own. If you wanted to add in your own image, create something, go to import resources under file, go to add, and you can load something in. I'll see if I got anything I can load. I don't know if I have anything that I can load in, but you get the idea. Basically, just you can load in whatever image. If you know what it's going to be, it's going to ask you what type of asset it is. If it's a texture, just tell it be a texture. Then you're going to import your resources. I usually just import it to shelf so that it'll be there forever. Like some of the ones I've imported were materials I found online. So like these textures right here actually were stuff that I imported myself. These are just science fiction styled textures, so like panels and stuff like that. Anyway, let's just do this arrow right here. So this guy right here. So this will pop up, and then what can happen is you can go in and you can paint essentially wherever this is. Now it's only going to paint on your selected texture set. Okay, it's not going to paint on any other objects. Just FYI. Now it looks kind of crappy. That's because this is set to a 512 map. If we want to make this look a little bit nicer, I'll turn that off. We can go up, jump this up to 2048, and it'll clean this up and it'll look a lot nicer. See? Easy peasy. Let's say you want to do some stripes or just do some cleaner painting. What we can do is go into orthographic view right here, and it'll just kind of flatten everything. And let's say I want to paint like a stripe across this. I'm going to do a new layer. And actually, this would be a good option for talking about masking. So I'm going to do a blue. There we go, a blue stripe. But the way I'm going to go about it is instead of painting, I'm going to actually use a mask to hide or basically reveal what I want. Okay. So I'm going to go over, I have a fill layer. This is a blue fill layer. And I'm going to go over to add black mask. So that's actually going to hide everything. I'm going to go and turn on symmetry. So you'll see symmetry kind of shows up here, just like that. And I'm going to go ahead and change my brush to, let's do a hard brush, basic hard, that'll work. I'm going to go and make my brush size a little bit bigger. Now notice that when I hit the black mask, that hid the fill layer that I just made. You'll see it pop up right here. There's a mask right there. So it's just like Photoshop. Black hides, white shows through. Okay. So basically what I'm doing is I will be creating a basically doing white strokes on the mask in order for it to show through. Okay. So I'm going to go and just kind of start painting. All right. And that'll allow me to kind of control this a little bit. All right. Now you see it's kind of cutting through this a little bit. If I wanted to do a straight line, I can click, hold down Shift, and you'll see this line kind of follows. And once I click again, it'll create a straight line for me, which is kind of nice. So I'm gonna hold down Alt, rotate, and then just tap on Shift. And it actually pops it over to the side view, which is nice. It's kind of like ZBrush actually. And then I can just very quickly go in and do that blue stripe. Now, it's not completely covered. You know, you can go through with your paintbrush and go in and kind of work on that a little bit. But that's a really quick way to just create like a really nice stripe. Now, since this is a layer, I can put it under the arrow that I created. And let's say if I want to do just like a quick dirt layer, what I can do is let's say another fill layer. And maybe this one's going to be like a dark charcoal. I'm going to do like a black mask. Again, it's hidden. Now we can add in what's called a generator. Okay, generator is basically drive a mask based on a set of parameters. It'll basically run anything set on parameters. It doesn't have to be just a mask, but we can do generator, And then in here, there's one called dirt. I'm going to use that. And so what'll happen is it's going to look at everything and it's going to basically create a dirt map. And it makes it look a little bit dirty. Now that's on top of the blue. That's also on top of the arrow. So that dirt is showing on top of both. So what you could do is we have that rusty paint and maybe something got painted on top of that. So that's showing. But then also there's dirt on top of this and oil and stuff like that. You can also change the level of dirt in the generator's options, which you can access by clicking on dirt. See, pops up. And then change it in there. If you want to change it, make it more extreme or whatever, you can play around with all that. It's a lot of fun to mess with that. Okay. Now, let's say we're happy. We want to go ahead and export this. I'm going to go to File, Export Textures. I don't need to export the mesh because I already got that. The object's already in Maya, right? So we already UV'd it. So I'm just going to export my textures. And I'm going to tell it where I want it to export. So let's just do, I have a file, scene file. So this is my scene project. It's going to go under my source images. It's in my project folder. And then I have a props folder. And then also my grenade. Okay. So I've already made textures for this. But, you know, since we're making new ones, I'm going to call it grenade alt. So maybe I have like a different grenade or something that shows up. And select that folder. Okay. We have an output template. This is going to be really useful to change since we're using RenderMan. There is actually a specific RenderMan one we can use, and we're using Pixar surfaces, so it'll actually create maps specifically for RenderMan using Pixar surfaces. So go ahead and click on that. It's going to ask you what size. I just go and tell it to do 4096 because I know I'm going to want these higher resolution maps. I'm just going to go with it. You know, you could go through the whole spiel of like, well, if it's an object that really doesn't get a lot of screen time, you can go with the lower resolution map and speed everything up. Absolutely 100% true. If you have an object that's like in the back of a scene that is like in there for like a couple frames, you could go with like a really low res map. Here's the thing. It's harder to up-res something than it is to down-res an image. If you take an object that's 512 by 512 in terms of map size, put it in Photoshop and try to up-res it to 4096, it's going to look awful. But I can take a 4096, down-res it to 512 if I need to. It'll look fine. It will look perfectly fine. So I tend to err on the side of trying to get a larger map out and then adjusting based on what the scene calls. And usually if I'm looking at it as, if the scene is really heavy, if I have really slow render times, I might go in and try to optimize my texture sizes a little bit to make things run a little bit faster. So that's where I'm coming from with this. I'm going to click on export since I got everything in here. Make sure that you have all of your objects selected. So it'll basically send everything out. If this is unchecked, it's not going to export it. You also want to make sure that these are actually named because it's going to create a map that actually says core, diffuse, button diffuse, bottom half diffuse, and it's going to name each one of these. Okay. So click export. And you'll notice that it's going to be creating maps that are names for the channels that we actually attach these to. So things like displacement, diffuse, specular face color, specular roughness, that should all be very, very common. You guys should be used to seeing this by now. So you'll see it all gets exported out into common channel names. And so what'll happen is you'll open up the object in Maya and attach everything, and it should look pretty close to what we see in there. So while that's going, I'm going to go and open up Maya. You can also save this scene to go back in and like edit it if you want to later on. I usually tend to do that. Cool, it's already done. All right. I'm gonna go and save it, Control S, props. I'm gonna put this into my grenade props. I already have one for grenade. I don't think I do. I've already done a grenade in here, so maybe I didn't save it, but either way, I'm gonna call it grenade. Alt. See, there we go. Excellent. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and I'm going to import that object. There we go. So there's my grenade. Let's go ahead and add a Pixar surface to it. And then we can go ahead and add our texture. So we're going to go to pattern, Pixar texture. Then we're going to look for the specific one, which is going to be under source images, props, grenade, grenade alt. So I got them all under here. So it's going to, I'm looking for top half diffuse. There we go. See that? That's the texture map. Looks good. Fantastic. All right, let's go and add in another channel to this. So we have a face color. We did have a face color channel that popped up, so we're going to do one in there. Grenade, top half, specular face color. Got some value in here. And maybe it'll be a good idea actually for us to let's do environmental daylight. Let's just go ahead and turn this on so we can see what it does as it's updating it. There we go. Okay. So we got the specular, we got the main color, and then let's go ahead and add the roughness. So we'll see what that does to it. So it's going to ask this. So what we're basically doing is we're basically connecting one of the channels for the map we created, which the roughness channel is what it's asking for is a grayscale image, basically black to white. And so since we're adding a texture node to it, those are only RBG and A channels. So we basically just need to say, hey, I need to basically take my red channel, which is going to be a grayscale channel anyhow, and then connect that into the roughness. So I'm going to do result R, which is my outgoing red channel. It honestly could be G or B. It's the same thing. Take that. Specular roughness is going to go specular roughness right here. There we go. See, it connects. Close. Go into the channel. It's going to ask us for a file. Top half, specular roughness. All right, so let's see if this changes anything. So right now it's looking at, now just updated. So now we should be getting some of that. Some of that breakup that we had before. Let's go ahead and go down to globals. We're going to add in the bump, or the normal map, I should say. And then we're going to go and do PXR normal map right here. Okay. And we're going to go to file name, top half, normal, right here. See what happens with that. So see, it's going to update in a second, and that's going to pop in with the there we go. Look at that. That is gorgeous. So now we're suddenly getting all that wonderful, beautiful detail. That looks good. So this should look like it looked like in Substance Painter. And that's how you basically attach materials in there. Now, if you're doing some glass or something with some translucency, we can also attach in the presence map as well. So if we go, and this will be one of the last maps we actually do. So presence is going to be right here. That's just going to be your translucency, your transparency. So go to pattern, and we're going to do XR texture. It's probably going to ask us, yeah. So again, presence is black and white. And it's going to ask us for presence. Where is it? QRS. Presence. There's so many things. There it is. I see it right there. Little dude. All right. Okay. File name, grenade top half. I thought I saw the presence in here. Maybe I was just blind. No, maybe not. Okay, so maybe we don't need the presence then. Which I really, honestly, we really wouldn't, because it's not translucent like any way whatsoever. Just gonna break that connection. But for the rest of the object, you would just go and attach everything like normal. Okay. There you go. Make sure, guys, when you do your rendering, you are not doing batch rendering, you're doing it through the render viewer, previewer, and then you're also setting it up for sRGB. So preview render. So you're changing it from linear to sRGB. So a little bit darker, so you'll need to adjust your lighting for that. One last thing is, you may notice that this here is showing faceting in the object. That doesn't look good. And that's coming from the fact that this object has a ton of little faces on here. So I could smooth it, and that is going to probably slow down my system. It's such a high poly thing. So if you can smooth it, awesome. Go ahead and do that. That'll be great. If you're working with a high poly object that just won't do that, mesh display, soften edge, okay? And that's going to basically soften this so that when it renders, it doesn't show as hard right through here, okay? So you'll see the difference. This one and this one. I'm not liking really what it's doing right here. I feel like that's kind of funky. I feel like honestly, we can just smooth the dang thing. It tends to work a little bit better. Something else you can do is, if you can't smooth it in the scene, is, say for example, it really needs to stay here because it's just too heavy. We can actually tell it to render smooth, okay? And I'll actually show you a good example of what I'm talking about. Is with this object. So if I hit 3, it's going to go into a sphere, right? We all got that. So if I leave it as a cube, it's going to go into a cube when I render it. But if I go into the render settings under Render man. Let's see, I'm looking for render smooth mesh. Should be open subdiv. So there's a subdivision scheme we can apply. It's usually a Catmull Clark, which I'm looking for where it actually should be. Subdivisions. So in order to get this to show up, what there used to be was a subdivision scheme option inside of here, which I've used for years, but I don't see it anymore. But an alternate way to get this to preview as smooth is to do Control Shift tilde, the tilde key on the right before the number 1, and you'll see it actually will give us a preview. And if you go in and do preview render, it'll show up as a round sphere, where it is most definitely not a round sphere. It's still a cube in here. So something to think about. That's pretty much it. That's your introduction to Substance Painter. I will upload some more videos, just kind of me going over some projects and stuff. But yeah, if you have any questions or anything, let me know.